The Assembly will hear an address by His Excellency Ismaaciil Omar Geelle, President and Head of Government of the Republic of Djibouti. I request protocol to escort His Excellency. On behalf of the General Assembly, I have the honor to welcome to the United Nations His Excellency Ismaaciil Omar Geelle, President and Head of Government of the Republic of Djibouti, and to invite him to address the Assembly.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Monsieur le Président.
Mr. President, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, heads of state and governments, Mr. Secretary General of the United Nations, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. President, allow me from the outset to congratulate you following your outstanding election to the presidency of the United Nations General Assembly for its 74th session. We're convinced that your diplomatic skills, your erudite nature, and your broad experience will enable you to carry out the difficult task of leading this great assembly. To this end, I would like to express the firm resolve and availability of my delegation to cooperate with you and your Bureau during this session. I would also like to convey my sincere thanks to Ms. Maria Espinosa and her team for the excellent work carried out during the 73rd session of the General Assembly. We can see from your term in office that there was great passion, commitment, and you promoted multilateralism. What you said always inspired us. Using a rich vocabulary imbued with culture, you showed us that poetic words and political thought were inextricably linked. I'd also like to express our sincere gratitude to the Secretary General of the United Nations for the praiseworthy efforts and actions that he and his special representatives and all UN staff make in situations and environments across the world that are very difficult. Mr. President, today we are gathered here in a worrisome context where multilateralism that has as its very foundation international cooperation, where multilateralism has been subject to attacks. This time of crisis is particularly paradoxical since it comes at a time where the ties of interdependence between the countries of the world have never been closer. Global challenges require global collective action. Multilateral action is crucial. It is urgently needed. It is only if we act collectively that we can find solutions to global challenges such as poverty, inequalities, and climate change. Even if challenges affect everybody to varying degrees, the poorest countries are the most exposed because they're so fragile. The geopolitical upheavals underway, the increase in tensions due to trade war and forecasts of lower economic growth create risks, and they also raise questions as to our capacity to mobilize the necessary resources to implement the SDGs by 2030. The World Bank reports have underscored the worrisome low level of investment volumes and the negative impact that that might have on the implementation of SDGs. These developments are particularly worrisome because at the time when this potentially transformative agenda was adopted, we were aware that we needed not only to adopt a radically different approach, but we also needed to mobilize an amount of financing that would be in trillions of dollars. It behoves, therefore, us all to pool resources whilst taking into consideration how they impact things sustainably. Governments need to improve the business climate to attract investments for sustainable development. The private sector needs to focus its efforts not on short-term investments but on long-term ones. There's also a need to find innovative solutions together in order to mobilise financing for the Sustainable Development Goals. So, from February 2014 onwards, Djibouti has had a system of mandatory healthcare insurance for working people and also a social healthcare programme for people with no income. Over these past 5 years, considerable efforts have been made to bolster and to strengthen and expand, rather, insurance to migrant populations and refugees in Djibouti. Djibouti reaffirms its commitment to Target 3.8 and the Sustainable Development Agenda of 2030 in order to achieve healthcare for all. Furthermore, Djibouti has made a conscious choice to focus on an integrated digital healthcare system. This is patient-centred. The idea is to have universal health care insurance and ultimately to have universal health coverage. Thus, we would be creating a healthcare system that would be better performing. Djibouti is also, ladies and gentlemen, determined to combat all forms of inequality, in particular, gender inequality. This aim is at the heart of our political agenda. The government, through structural reforms, is continuing its key mission, namely to eradicate political, economic and social obstacles facing women. At the beginning of this year, indeed, a law was passed increasing the quota of Djibouti women from 10 to 25% within the National Assembly. Climate change is the most threatening and serious challenge of our time. Our thoughts go out in particular to our brothers and sisters in the Bahamas, devastated by the destruction that brought death and destruction on a scale never seen before. We'd like to reiterate our gratitude to the Secretary-General for the numerous initiatives he has taken to continue to focus attention on a phenomenon that has disastrous consequences. The lively debates that we had during the Climate Summit enabled us to identify specific areas of action. The welcome movement to bring peace to the Horn of Africa is continuing. Our country's determination to build on the progress made increases every day. We believe that complete, lasting peace in our region is possible, and that belief is strengthening every day. The most recent good news comes to us from a neighbouring brotherly country, Sudan. We welcome success in negotiations that has led to a peaceful solution to the crisis and the signature of a power-sharing agreement. In South Sudan, the peace process is making encouraging progress. Talks between President Salva Kiir and Riek Machar is a significant development. We note in particular the renewal of their commitment to form a transition government by the 12th of November. Djibouti is a member of IGAD, and Djibouti will continue to urge the parties to continue their efforts to find a solution to the political impasse and to uphold their commitments. On Somalia, there have been tensions stemming from the political dynamic surrounding the elections in the member states of the Federation. However, and there were also acts of violence perpetrated by Al-Shabaab. However, we are encouraged by progress made economically and in the security sector. We need to step up efforts in order to aid Somalia to achieve its priorities, namely the federal elections, strengthening security, implementing far-reaching economic reforms and debt relief. Everything needs to be done in order to ensure that the positive regional dynamic helps both stabilisation and helps the efforts to implement the transition plan underway. This will thus create a propitious environment for national reconciliation. We remain confident that relations between my country and Eritrea will further improve and that the pending questions will be finally resolved. Djibouti is seriously committed to peace and to promoting healthy and robust bilateral solutions with all of its neighbouring countries. Together, we need to work unfailingly to step up efforts to promote regional integrations. To this end, we commend the dedication with which the Ethiopian Prime Minister, Mr. Abiy Ahmed, is working to bring together the opinions of my country and that of Eritrea. Mr. President, terrorism is an existential threat to the peace and security of our countries. We cannot accept innocent civilians being massacred and mutilated using wrong pretexts. The situation in the Sahel is extremely worrisome to us as Africans. We reaffirm our support and we stand in solidarity with all Sahel countries confronted with this serious peril. They are making considerable efforts within the context of the G5 Sahel. We would urge the international community to mobilise necessary financial resources to support these efforts. We also welcome the conclusions of the extraordinary summit of the ECOWAS meeting that took place on the 14th of September this year. Mr. President, we firmly condemn the 14th of September attack on the oil facilities in Saudi Arabia. This is a very serious incident. It runs counter to the de-escalation efforts promoted by the international community. Regarding Yemen, we are extremely worried about the deteriorating health situation and the increased risk of the country fragmenting. We reaffirm our solidarity with the legitimate authorities of Yemen. We commend the political resolve to continue efforts to implement the Stockholm Agreement, despite negative developments which have made the political climate very difficult. Djibouti will continue to welcome brothers and sisters from Yemen. This fraternal country is dealing with an unprecedented humanitarian tragedy. Right from the beginning, my country, Djibouti, generously has hosted Yemeni refugees, and it will continue to do so. The resurgence of violence in the occupied Palestinian territories each day pushes further away the prospects of a two-state solution. These settlements are not only a violation of international law, and in particular Article 49 of the Fourth Geneva Convention, but also the human rights of the Palestinians. We firmly condemn the plans for the annexation plans of the Jordan Valley and northern Dead Sea, recently announced by Israel.
First session on June 2020, the General Assembly will hold an election for 5 non-permanent seats on the Security Council for the period 2021-2022. One of which is allocated for Africa. Pursuant to the African Group's tradition of sub-regional rotation, this seat should be occupied by an East African state. Under the rules of the African Union, it is indisputable that Djibouti should be the African Group's candidate for the seat on the Security Council for the period 2021-2022. The principle of rotation ensures that all African states, large or small, have equal opportunity to serve on Security Council and other United Nations bodies. In light of the above, and out of respect for the sovereign equality of states, Djibouti respectfully urges all members states to support its candidature for the Security Council for the period 2022. If elected, Djibouti will relentlessly promote the obligation of all states to uphold international law in the maintenance of peace and security, and advocate for recommitment to a multilateral, rule-based international order.
Mr. President, we need to rally our efforts, our resources, and we need to create safe and solid conditions in order to build multilateralism. Failure is not an option. This is why we support the German and French initiative, the Alliance for Multilateralism. Thank you very much indeed.
On behalf of the General Assembly, I wish to thank His Excellency Ismaaciil Omar Geelle, President and Head of Government of the Republic of Djibouti. May I request representatives to remain seated while we greet the Head of State.